I want to welcome everybody to our April Art Byte, brought to you by the Alaska Arts Education Consortium. Art Bytes are monthly hour-long arts integration professional development workshops that are designed to support Alaska's teachers to integrate arts across their curriculums. And each month during our school years, we strive to bring diverse topics, techniques, mediums taught by Alaska's own educators to your very classrooms through distance delivery. I'm going to start with a land acknowledgement, which is a formal statement that recognizes and respects Indigenous peoples as traditional stewards of the land and the enduring relationship that exists between Indigenous peoples and their traditional territories. So I am joining this art bite from the land of the Sugpiaq Kikdachmut people of Kodiak Island, and I invite you to share your land acknowledgement in the chat with us here. And we hope that you will walk away with some great ideas to help you integrate the arts into your curriculum and classroom practice. Today, our artist is Kristin Link. She's a fine artist and science illustrator inspired by the natural world. And through her art, she teaches and connects people to nature. So she's a very experienced teaching artist in many of the schools across Alaska and will be a featured teacher leader in our AAEC upcoming Kodiak Science, Literacy, and Arts Institute this June. So I hand it over to Kristin.
Thank you so much. I'm worried my internet just got really glitchy. I was working on Zoom all day and it was fine. But I'm joining you today from my cabin in McCarthy, and which is on Athabascan land. I'm going to start out by sharing a little bit about a project I've been working on and kind of the process of building collaborative murals that I've been doing in different schools around Alaska. And then I have a little acrylic lesson or painting lesson that we can start working on together. To kind of like do our own mural of a place that's special to us. So I'm going to share my screen so you can see some pictures. All right, so a little bit about myself and my work. I spend about a third of my time working as a science illustrator. So these are some examples of science illustration projects I do. About a third of my time doing my own fine art that is inspired by science and the landscape, especially in Alaska, but also landscapes that are connected to Alaska. And then I also spend like the other third of my time or professional time teaching and working with students.
Do you mind muting your microphone? Sorry, go ahead, Kristin.
And this one thing that I love to do while I'm teaching is do these collaborative murals. So this is the community of McCarthy where I live on our nail shack. And I worked with students of different ages. We don't have a school out here, but we're into them. And then we work together to paint it on the wall. So in schools, this is an example of the Dalton School, working with their inner entryway. So we did different seasons on the walls and kind of looking at plants and animals and fish swimming up upstream in their stairs. And this process works with directly, is it directly inspired by the student artwork? So that's an example of that. This is another example in Nome with the Anvil City Science Academy, working with the middle school students there. And we were tying it to geology and kind of looking at the landscape. And it's been really fun to get to do that, and also cool to paint these projects together in person because we work together to kind of build up layers and kind of like starting with filling in the backgrounds and then successively adding more detail as the mural gets finished. So it's really a collaborative project where, you know, one student will do the drawing, then another student will paint in that drawing, and another student might finish it, which is a cool process. So this is that mural in Front Street where it ended up in Nome. And then this is one more that I did last year in Gamble. same idea. I wanted to share just this example of kind of taking that mural off from acrylic painting, and that it could also be done with collage. So I think that's kind of a quick, maybe potentially quick and easy way to do it that might be more accessible for different classes. So this is one fish collage I did with the arts administrators workshop, where each administrator created their own fish, and then we cut them out and collaged them together in paper. And then recently I've been working on kind of doing some digital versions of that. Since we can't all be together cutting up paper together, we can still share artwork and put it together in one composition. And these are some more kind of other styles of murals. The top one is a digital collage, working with student drawings from the Girdwood Fine Arts Camp, and the bottom is another paper collage looking at different landforms and animals on St. Lawrence Island that I worked on with Sabunga students. So the project that I'm working on right now, or one of the projects I'm working on right now, is to create a series of 7 murals for the future teacher space at UAF. And I'm working with 7 different schools to create kind of tall, skinny murals that are going to go in this space in the new classroom, where pre-service teachers will get to learn. So they'll get to see artwork that was created by students from all over Alaska before they go out to teach themselves. So these are the 7 different communities that we're working with. And that process, obviously we can't be together, so we've adapted to doing it on distance. But I start
Did we lose you, Kristin?
laying outside, building forts.
Your audio is kind of cutting in and out.
Building fires on the beach and things like that too. So it's really fun to see kind of the different drawings and hear about their different communities. After they do that brainstorming phase, some different activities in Shagaluk. After they do that, I read through all their brainstorming pages, and we come up with a list of potential things to draw. And then I spend time with them working on creating illustrations. So they each do a drawing. These are some from the Watershed School in Fairbanks. And then the next step is putting them together into a composition. So they're just getting their drawings back to me now. I have like drawings from 3 schools, and I'm working on putting them together into a composition. So I'm still working on this, and I feel this is like student drawings for the Watershed School, looking at Fairbanks and kind of some of the animals in the forest that are there. And I'll keep working on these drawings this weekend. And then what I'm gonna do next is send them the finished design based on their drawings back to them so they can color in a version. And then I'll take the final version and paint a mural of it that will go into the future teacher space. So that's kind of some of the stuff that I've been doing with collaborative. I was trying to think of what to do. I wanted to do something that was a little mini landscape. I have these 8x8 canvases, and I figured we could do our own landscape together, so you can kind of follow along with me or do your own. But the basic process is to sketch it out, and then we'll start painting in the main blocks of color. So here I started with like the sky, the mountains in the foreground, and then coming in and adding in some of the detail in the foreground, and finishing off with more details. So in like 50 minutes that we have, we can do a bit of that. All right, so today we're gonna do an acrylic painting together, kind of combining some ideas that I use when I'm doing collaborative murals, but then also kind of making it our own. So I have a little landscape scene that I made.
based on one of my favorite times out here in the Wrangell Mountains in the fall when the tundra turns all colors and you can go berry picking. So for our paintings, we'll start with the background and then fill in all the spaces, and then we'll come and do the foreground or the detail in the berries at the end. I have an 8x8 just primed plain canvas, and then I have my palette set up with the primary colors red, yellow, blue. I also have black, brown, and white. Before I started, make a little color wheel just to test out my colors. So you can see I have these 3 primary colors. I was able to mix a pretty vibrant orange and green, but the purple I got is a little bit muddy because the red I have is not very magenta-y, so it creates a little bit of a muddy purple, but I think it'll be fine for what we're doing today, and it's good to use the supplies you have. So to start, we'll sketch out the design. I have this drawing that I made to work from. The first thing I'll do is draw this middle ground, which will be my tundra hill. Kind of coming across at a diagonal. Then in my background, far away, I'm gonna have a kind of like straight line over here that I envision being kind of like a braided glacial river valley. So we have a lot of those in the Wrangells. And then maybe a few layers of rolling hills, low mountains. And then I like here we have these big glaciated mountains in the distance. So I'm going to put in a few of those. And then in the foreground, I have a few tundra plants that I'm going to sketch out. I'm going to start with my blueberries. So I'm going to start by just drawing their stems. And then I'm going to think about blueberry leaves are kind of like little ovals. I might make this one come down a little bit shorter so it's not reaching up all the way to the top there. I'm going to put in some crowberry or blackberry plants. So those ones have just little needle-like leaves, kind of like that. I'm going to put some over here on this side. I'm going to put in a willow plant here. Actually, no, that's right. I'm just thinking as I draw these plants in how they sort of break this line and interact with the background. So I want there to be a little bit of this showing over here. I get bigger as I go down. And then there's going to be some low bush cranberries down low at the bottom. I also want to put in my berries. So I've got cranberries, blackberries, blueberries, more blackberries, which are some of my favorite berries to find and plants to see in the tundra. All right, to paint this in, we're going to start with the blue sky in the background and then paint our way towards the foreground. I have my acrylics, I have a paper towel, a jar of water, and a couple brushes in different sizes. When I do skies, I like to think about starting with a light blue at the bottom towards the horizon line, and then getting the sky darker as you go up higher. Because there's actually, the horizon in the sky is farther away from you, so it has more atmosphere and is lighter in value, whereas you get up towards the top, that sky is closer to you. So I'm just mixing some blue with my white. I can add a little bit of water to get the paint to flow a little bit better. It usually makes sense to start with a little bit of water in your paint to fill in the background. And I'm just going to start with my light blue. Painting around my mountains. Might rotate my canvas a little bit just for this part. So feel free to follow along with, the way I'm doing my colors in my landscape, but you can also make this your own and, do a sunset sky or a stormy sky. You can do a different time of year, different plants, different details on the landscape. I did this painting on Earth Day as a way to kind of celebrate parts of the earth near me in the Wrangell Mountains. So these are some of my favorite parts of the landscape that I appreciate, but feel free to adapt this activity for your own place where you are. Going up the sky, I'm going to add some darker blue. And once I get it on my canvas, I can blend it. Once I get the paint off my brush, I can blend it with this layer that I already put down. So I'm just taking my pretty dry brush and blending it with the light blue. Once I get that down, I'm going to come up and get a little bit darker, and I might add a little bit of yellow in now too. I like my skies to get just a little bit greenish at the top for contrast sometimes. So I'm going to put that down. You can always add water if you want your paint to spread a little bit more smoothly on your canvas or your paper. Mix that down. And all the way across. Since we're getting this painting done in about an hour or less than an hour in one sitting, maybe not everything's going to be smooth and perfect. You can always come back and add more layers or refine details later, but we'll get a good impression down. And sometimes it's fun to paint quickly also. Just kind of lay things down. The next thing we're going to paint in is these mountains in the background. So for them, I'm going to mix some blue, or rather mostly white with just a tiny bit of blue. And might put in, sometimes I'll put a little tiny, just the corner, smallest amount of yellow into that. to kind of like brighten them up a little bit. And I'm going to paint those in. And wash off my brush. I might come back in actually with a smaller brush just to sharpen up the edges and really define them a little bit more. Trying to get the paint a little bit thicker so that you can't see through the pencil line. There we go. All right, now I'm going to leave that. Then for the next layer, I'm going to go, I want the things that are farther away to be kind of cooler in color. So I'm going to have a bright orange or dusty orange hillside, but I think my farther away mountains can be kind of like a burnt purple color. So I'm going to use the purple that I get when I mix my red with my blue, which is quite muddy, and then add some white to that. Great. And then I might paint that in with my small brush again. So that'll be my farthest away layer of hills. For the next layer moving forward, I'm just going to add a little bit more red so that things get warmer as you come forward. Maybe a little bit of yellow too, make it more brown. And some white. And I might want those to be a little bit more different. So I'm just going to add a little bit more yellow and some white. Sometimes you can test out your color before you put it on the canvas, but especially since we're working in acrylic, you can just paint over it and blend it as we're going. Sure that's all covered in. And then in this area, I want that to be kind of a lighter brown, sort of like the color of glacial silt, to show that it's a maybe a river, flat channel. Maybe you wouldn't see the water in it, just the flat bottom. Maybe add some more white to get a little bit more contrast there. Okay. Okay, the next thing I'm going to paint in is my tundra hillside. So for that, I'm going to mix up my kind of dusty orange. Just going to get that little white spot there. So we'll mix some red with yellow. I need a lot of yellow for this one. And I'll add some more yellow, white, and blue to dull it down and kind of make it a little bit brownish. Okay. Add a bunch more yellow to it. And then I want to mix it up, let's see, so that it's thin enough to kind of cover this area, and also so that I can still see my pencil lines through it. Just adding a little bit more red. So I'm adding a bit of water to it so that I can thin it down for that purpose. And then we'll see. So you can see when I paint on top that I'm still able to see my drawing through that. And I'm just going to tilt my canvas one more time to kind of get this edge nice and crisp. And I can draw down from there. Okay, right side up again. So now I'm just going to fill in all this space. I want to make sure I go all the way to the edge. And the other advantage to using kind of a thin wash of paint is that it'll dry relatively quickly, so we can keep painting the foreground, the plants. All right, so that has good coverage. I'm going to give it a minute to dry, and while I'm doing that, I'm going to think about kind of adding a couple layers into my background or middle, background, middle ground, so that there's kind of continuity in the color palette throughout. So I might take a little bit of white to add to this orange color, and just paint some of that into these hills back here, so that you kind of get the sense that whatever's growing here is also growing back there, and that the landscape is continuous. And then behind that, maybe I'll add in a little bit more of this orange too. It's nice to have a little bit of variation in places. I'll put a little bit of that in the background or the next layer also. And maybe put in a little bit of shadow between them. Maybe there's like a creek coming down in here, connecting them. this one's coming forward up to there. I don't know. And I'm just going to go over my faraway mountains one more time to distinguish them from the sky. With some white, getting them to brighten up. Cool. The next thing I'm going to do is start mixing up some of my colors that I'm going to use for the tundra plants. So I'm going to start with a brown that I will use for the stems. You can mix your own brown with the 3 complementary colors, or I have a brown that I already have mixed for me, so I'm going to use that. I also want a couple different kinds of greens. So I want a dark green for the blackberry and cranberry leaves. So I'm going to use a darker blue and a little bit of yellow. And then I want more of an olive green for the blueberry leaves. So I'm going to use my warmer blue. And switch brushes actually. Yellow. And some white. And actually a little bit of red too, because that'll make it dull it down a little bit so it's not so bright. And some white. Not that much white. Okay. So I'm going to start by painting in the stems. And that'll be kind of the map I use for the rest of the plants. And I'm going to zoom in so you can see me paint this part, since you already saw me mix the colors. I'll start on the left and work across. So starting with my blackberry. Oops. The willow. And then these 3 at the end. Maybe make that one a little bit darker. Okay. Maybe I'll do a little bit of, I'm just gonna mix some red in with my brown and paint that on the willow stem. Yeah, add some white too, just to make that one a little bit different. Although I don't want to make it too similar to the background because then it'll just get dissolved into the background. So I'll just go over it again with some brown and red. The leaves are going to be different colors, so that will give a sense of variation. For the willow leaves, I'm going to paint them yellow, and sometimes yellow doesn't come up very well against a dark background, so I'm actually going to start with just a layer of white and yellow before I paint. Fill them in with more detailed yellow or a darker yellow. This will just kind of give us a place to start. Sometimes with acrylic it makes sense to kind of like outline things in white, or fill in that shape with white before we paint. Fill it in with color just to get it to stand out from the background, especially when you're using a lighter, more transparent pigment like yellow. Okay. Next I'll start back on the left and come in with my dark green that I mixed up before and do some of these crowberry leaves. So they're, again, kind of like small needles. Okay. Next I'll do my blueberry leaves. Just spritz my paint so they don't get too dry. So as I go, I got a little bit of variation in my green. I'm just going to come back in a couple places to make that green maybe a little bit bluer or more yellow, or lighter by adding a little bit of white so that there's variation in these leaves. Mix a little bit of white and yellow in. Variation makes it seem more like something you'd see in nature, and also makes it a little bit more interesting to look at. It's not all the same. We'll come back to our willow leaves in a minute, but we'll do the rest of our of the crowberry leaves over here. And for them, we'll add a little bit of highlights and shadows at the end. We're doing our detail. Okay, next I'm going to paint the cranberries in. They might overlap with some of these bushes. They also don't have to be exactly where I drew them. And then I'm going to paint the willows in with yellow over top of the white. Oops. I just spilled some water, so I'm going to wipe that up. All right. It's fine. I picked up the paint below, but it's not going to hurt anything. All right, so yellow. Maybe mix in some white again, but less than last time. We're going to paint that on top. Okay, I need to paint in my berries and do a little bit of detail work, but I'm gonna step back and just spend some time adding a little bit more interest to this, my orange hillside. So I might go back to that kind of dusty orange that I mixed up earlier and work with some variations within that. Maybe adding a little bit of yellow and white to it, and coming in and adding a couple highlights like along the edge of the hillside to make it look like the sun is hitting it there. Painting in between my leaves. If they're still wet, they might smudge, which is not the end of the world, but we'll try and paint around them a little bit. I'll go back to my smaller brush again. I'm going to mix up some brighter reds and add some of that in. Again, maybe painting a little bit in between where my leaves are, around my leaves. Can also kind of make them stand out a little bit more. Just making little dabs and marks, thinking about how vegetation might look growing there. It's not always in straight lines. Mix up another orange, a little bit of blue to it, a little bit of white. This is more similar to my background color, so I can just dab that in there. fix up any places maybe where I went out of the lines. And then I also think there's some places that would have more shadows. So I'm gonna have a bit of a purpley shadow color. Just adding some blue to that orange I had before. Kind of this similar color to back here. And add some of that in. Especially down towards the bottom. Where the ground is. And I want to also add in a little bit of green. Because I'm sure there's other places that there's blueberry bushes growing back here than just near the blueberries. So put in a little bit of that as well. And a couple dots. The next thing I need to do is add my berries. So I'm going to start with the blackberries, and I'll paint those in just black. And then I'll come on top and add more details. Oops, that one's getting a little big. To make them seem rounder. Do my blueberries. I'm gonna go in with dark blue first for them. And my cranberries down at the bottom are going to be bright red. So to make the berries stand out, I'm going to add some highlights to them. So for the blackberries, I'm going to add a pink highlight. And if I mix it in with the black paint that's already on there, it'll kind of blend on the canvas. You want it to be a little bit more blended. And come back with a another layer with some black and maybe a little bit of blue mixed in, and kind of get that middle ground so that those highlights aren't so big. For the blueberries, I'm going to make a light blue. Blue and white. And paint some of those highlights on. And for the cranberries, we'll use that light pink again. And then for some of them, I want just a little bit more brightness. So I'm just going to use white and add a couple little highlights to make them seem really round and shiny. Maybe let the paint dry a little bit more. Next, I'm just going to add a couple of highlights and shadows to some of my leaves, just to make it build up some of the details there. So I can add some shadows to some of my blueberry leaves. I can also take my lighter green and add some highlights to some of these guys, again to have some variation in the crowberry leaves so they're not all the same. And then also highlight how some of my cranberries are shiny, because their leaves are quite waxy and shiny, so they have some bright highlights on them. And then I can come back to my willow and maybe add some more highlights to that. Some details to the leaves. And maybe make a little bit of a deeper red for some of these cranberries. Then come back with my bright red. But save a little highlight. And then maybe do any last cleanup I want in the background, maybe covering up some of my pencil marks. But again, you know, it doesn't have to be totally finished. It's a little bit of a impressionistic painting, kind of painted from memory, but in celebration of like that impression of being out in the tundra picking berries. So you can keep working on it, or could call it good enough for now. And I'm going to call that good enough for now. My painting for Earth Day, celebrating being in the mountains and picking berries.
Barbara Short. Tell everybody that's on board, if you don't know, that there's 4 trainings this summer that the consortium is doing. Kristin is teaching at one of them. She's teaching at the Kodiak one. There's also going to be a 1-week social emotional learning and the arts in Kenai, a multicultural arts institute in Fairbanks. And those are all 1 week and 2 credits. And then there's a 2-week, 8 days really, and 3 credit Southeast Alaska focused institute in July and early August. and they're all on our website, and we'd love to have you join us. There's 4 fantastic teachers at each one, and Kristin, like I said, is at one of them.
Stay tuned for next month's AEC Art Byte. The newsletter will come out and tell you some information about it. Shona Strouser, she'll be having a session on improvisation May 19th from 4 to 5. We'll create a flyer and get that out to you within the next couple weeks. So thank you very much to Kristin and to all of you for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you all.